Very good evening to all of you. Thanks for tuning in to this Sunday edition of the Urban Debate. I am Afrida Rahman Ali. We are going to look at the state of Goa closely today to see what the ground situation is like. Even as we speak, a cyclonic storm is raging across Goa with gusty winds and torrential rains that are now being faced by Goans on the ground. But what we are also going to talk about are the dark hours between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. on Saturday that claimed 8 more lives. Despite the strongest of terms that the Goa bench of the Bombay High Court used to save lives in the Goa Medical College, more incidents of deaths being reported. And let's just tell our viewers what the figures are looking like at the moment. The toll of COVID patients' deaths due to the alleged oxygen crisis at the premier government hospital has risen to 83 in the past 6 days. Today, the state has come under the grips of cyclone Tokte, posing multiple challenges now to the state administration. But one of the primary issues that we are going to continue to look at is whether there is a strange sense of denial by the state administration on the issue of oxygen shortage. There are contradictory statements, there are conflicting statements coming from the ministers of the same government. GMC doctors, the Goa Medical College doctors, are reluctant to directly attribute the deaths to the shortage of oxygen supply. But if you talk to nurses, you talk to patients, you talk to journalists, also will tell you that it is very possible that these deaths have happened because of the transitory dips and the interruptions in the oxygen supply. So it's become a big issue, despite the court pulling up the administration saying people cannot be allowed to die in this manner. The logistic issues that were cited by the state government were dismissed by the court, saying these are not issues owing to which lives can be snuffed out of people. So the horror of crumbling health infrastructure now also because of the cyclone is staring at Goa, and we need to talk about that. We'll also talk about the issue of the power disruptions that is immediately causing a lot of problems for the people living there. The challenges are mounting, like I said, with the threat of many of the structures now coming under the influence of the cyclonic storm. The Goa Medical College also faced it with part of its roof collapsing because of the storm. So that is the severity of the situation. Let me introduce my guests joining us here on the Urban Debate today. I have Vijay Sardesai, MLA of Fatorda of the Goa Forward Party. Also with me, Vishwas Pathak, spokesperson of the BJP. And I am going to also be joined shortly by Dr. Shekhar Salkar, who is an oncosurgeon, chief of the Department of Oncology in the Manipal Goa hospitals, and also president of the BJP Media Cell. So I'm going to first put this question to you, Mr. Vijay Sardesai, since you are there in Goa. First of all, tell us immediately what exactly is the situation, because I know that you have used very strong terms to say that there are serial deaths going on. I read some of your quotes. Now, I want to first ask you to help us understand how severe is the situation on ground, which you've been so vociferously been talking about so far.
The situation on the ground is very grave, more because, at the moment, this is an unprecedented cyclone, which people say in the last 4 decades, no one has ever seen a cyclone.
Yes.
But the issue that we are discussing is 83 people dying in the last 5 days. In the last 5 days, not tonight, means not last night. 5 consecutive nights, 83
Yes.
innocent Goans have been victims of mismanagement, basically oxygen shortage. They have not died because of COVID in the dark hours, which is between 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. But these people have died because of oxygen shortage as a result of logistical issues cited by the government in an affidavit in a public interest litigation that is being heard by the Goa bench of the Bombay High Court, of which also my political party is also a party to the petition. Now, these 89 people who have died, this is basically not serial deaths. I'm calling this serial killing of innocent Goans. Because the BJP MLA from the capital city himself has said that people are being murdered at the GMC in the dark hours of the night. Now, what we are trying to say is, I don't like to criticize our state on national media often, because I am also a proud Goikar, a Goan from Goa, and I've don't want my state to be, a laughing stock because of people dying because we didn't have a driver to drive a tractor and to maneuver the vehicle in the hold of the GMC where the oxygen cylinders were supposed to be brought there. So I know these are lame excuses. What I'm trying to say is for us, Goan lives matter. Maybe to the chief minister they don't, but to us, every Goan citizen, these Goan lives matter. And how many of the 43 who have died in the last day, means today the figures are 43. Many of them have died at GMC. We don't know how many of them have died at the dark hour because now they've started hiding facts. As you have said yourself, that they are hiding facts now. They are not coming clean. But the High Court has intervened because...
No, that is what the opposition is saying, and local journalists are saying that the actual figures are higher and the death toll, according to your party, is much higher than the official figures. That is one of the points you are making. And yes, I agree with you, Goan lives matter. I'm coming back to you. Yes.
I am not only making this point, it is also the BJP MLAs who are making this point, which incidentally is not being covered by the national media. It is the BJP MLAs who have started talking. The core committee of the BJP has met and said that the chief minister is mismanaging the situation. So it is not only I who am, opposition.
I will get a response on that from Mr. Vishwas Pathak, but first let me go across to Mr. Pramod Acharya, who's on the phone line with us. He's the editor of Prudent Media. Mr. Acharya, from your understanding, this tendency not to come up with what is the real reason of 83 patients dying in GMC, why this tendency to hide the real reason? We still don't have an official statement on what is the cause of death, because the doctors are reluctant to attribute the deaths to the disruption in oxygen supply, even though everything else is suggesting, and we know that there's a Times of India report today also showing us when exactly the dips in the oxygen supply happened and for how long. All of that is in the public domain, yet the state government is unwilling and reluctant to accept that these deaths have occurred because of the oxygen disruption.
See, we need to understand one thing very clearly. The government admitted before the High Court that there is shortage of oxygen. The state government admitted before the High Court that there is oxygen pressure problem. The state government admitted before the High Court that there are logistics issues, tractor driver issues, and all these things. So, although they have been reluctant to come in front of media and public and admitting these facts, intervention of the High Court, they had to put on record certain facts which they were trying to hide all along. Now, these are the facts that they have admitted in the High Court. This is no longer speculation. Secondly, when we talk about 83 deaths, I have been consistently saying this. 83 deaths is a figure that we started counting after High Court intervened. But we as journalists, political representatives, even bureaucrats will tell you that we were getting calls post-midnight, at least for 10 days before that the oxygen levels are dipping, that the cylinders are empty, there is no refilling, there is no resupply. So if you ask me, the death toll is certainly higher because of this cause, because this is not a 4-5-day-old issue. This is for me a 10-15-day-old issue. We started getting the figures on record after High Court intervened. So from that perspective, obviously, if you take an average of 20 deaths per night that were happening when the High Court intervened, and you take another 10 days and 20 deaths per day to it, the death toll is much higher. So obviously, these are the facts that have come on record because the High Court intervened. Otherwise, nobody would have come on record with these figures. We were getting calls for 10 days. Each one of us are trying to do our best to help people. But from the government point of view, there was not much intervention at all. That has happened post High Court intervention. So yes, this is not a old issue. This is for me a 15-20 day old issue.
Yes, you're right. Also, we have this information where Dr. Bandekar, who is the GMCH Dean, has submitted in an affidavit in court that there is a deficit of 6.5 metric tons of oxygen as on 11th May. So what you're saying that this has been on, the shortage, the crisis is not a 3 or 4 days old. What you're telling us, Mr. Acharya, is that for about 10 days this crisis was being felt, and it was only after the High Court intervention that now the media is also reporting about it aggressively. But on Thursday, Dr. Bandekar, the Dean of the Goa Medical College, had told Bombay High Court that the hospital realistically needs 72 trolleys of oxygen if patients have to be effectively treated. Even after that, we are reporting deaths, and even after that, there is a complete lack of transparency, which is actually, really baffling. I want you to respond to this, Mr. Pathak. Why? Why is there a tendency to dodge, deny, dismiss? This is not going to help anyone.
So there is no question of dodging any information. So we are a democratic country, and Goa has a duly run governed party there already. So we cannot hide beyond point. See, we cannot extrapolate the death figures just by saying that before High Court intervention there was something else, now there is something else. Death is death. Those figures are always out in public domain, and one can see that. There is no question of hiding it. The point is that there are certainly some lapses by the authorities. There is no question of denial. However, in today's press conference, Dean has feared that all the deaths are not attributed to oxygen shortage alone. It can be comorbidity, it can be other things also. Now, it is a matter of inquiry. High-level committee inquiry has already been instituted, and the report of that committee is yet to come out. Once that report is come out, we will come to know what exactly it is. However, I am not defending. There are certainly some lapses. Coupled with that, there is a natural calamity from today. Therefore, in this super specialty hospital, patients are again facing some problem. However, today our health minister, Mr. Rane, as well as our chief minister, jointly they visited the government hospital. 20,000 liter capacity oxygen plant has been instituted. With that, situation will certainly be improved. And there can be a half truth also that there was no oxygen. But whenever there was an occurrence in early morning hours, within 20-30 minutes, oxygen supply was restored. It means oxygen probably was there, but because of the manual replacement of cylinders and all that, that has happened, which I am not going to defend it. And I think because of this sudden spurt in these COVID cases, situation overwhelmed, and authorities failed to control it.
This was a submission in court that there were logistical issues involved in maneuvering the tractor which carries the trolleys of oxygen and in connecting the cylinders to the manifold, and during that process there was some interruption. So that part is being admitted. Now you are telling us that while we admit that, we cannot attribute the deaths to the oxygen interruption. Mr. Sardesai, respond to that.
No, one second. See, this is what Dean has told today. Now, I want to put one question to Mr. Sardesai. To my knowledge, he was minister in this Goa government, and he is aware of how Goa system works. See, this is not happened in just 10 days or 15 days time. If health infrastructure is not good, it is not good. And therefore, Mr. Sardesai is also responsible. Today, suddenly he is waking up and blaming.
No, I don't buy that. I'm sorry. In a pandemic situation, every state is aware, every health department is aware that you're supposed to prepare for a second wave. You can't now go and blame the previous regime for not preparing for this. There was no pandemic at that time. But your party was in power when the pandemic hit the state. You were supposed to put certain infrastructure in place. Now you can't go back and say, well, what were they doing all this while? Why didn't they get a system in place to deal with the pandemic? There was no pandemic at that time.
There is no question of blaming each other. We have to work together.
Exactly, but you are saying that when he was in power, he should be answerable. That is not an acceptable argument, sir.
I am following
Mr. Sardesai, respond.
7 weeks, he's simply criticizing. He has to come up with some solution also.
The issue here is that the first case of COVID in Goa was recorded on the 25th of March 2020. Subsequent to which there was 60 days of lockdown, which people meticulously followed. And on 1st May 2020, the Chief Minister proudly proclaimed that Goa had become a green zone. In this interim period of March to May, what the government did was only facilitated iron ore and coal transportation. In June 2020, the week average of COVID was 359. In May 2021, the week average is 2,800, which is almost 8 times higher. In a state of 15 lakhs, we have 1,34,000, which is almost 10% of the population, already tested positive. Now, I'm just giving these facts. Why I'm giving these facts is one, because this chief minister who calls himself a doctor doesn't seem to be thinking like a doctor, because he did not expect the second wave. He immobilized whatever facilities that were done during the first wave. And now they are a spokesman who is not from Goa, who doesn't know anything of Goa. He's trying to defend the chief minister by pointing fingers to me, because I am talking the truth. Because nobody from the state BJP is willing to come on the record. Why are they not willing to come on the record? Why are they running away from this? Where is the transparency? Pramod Acharya has just said that there is no transparency. It is true. Where is the transparency? And the whole focus in this entire period for the chief minister has only been business, livelihoods, more than life. He doesn't seem to, he's looking at the pandemic as a sort of a time-bound exercise. He's not looking at the pandemic he's looking at it like an election. Just give some speeches and win the election. He's not thinking like a doctor. And he's also arrogant. And he doesn't want to take advice and suggestions. He started a dictum called Bhupachi Garazna, which means don't fear the pandemic. When the whole world was telling us to fear the pandemic, he told us don't fear the pandemic. We are the last state in the country to declare a curfew.
All right, I want to bring in Mr. Acharya again. Mr. Pramod Acharya, corroborate for us what Mr. Vijay Sardesai is saying, because we need to establish the severity right now. No, let me bring in all the speakers, please. Allow me to bring the others in as well. The severity, if we look at now, the GMCH apparently has a capacity of 708. Currently, 953 people are admitted, and out of them, 160 are in ICU. Now, this is the kind of pressure the government-run hospital is facing. 15th of May figures tell us that the daily cases are now somewhere over 2,600 in Goa. The positivity rate is close to 40%. The rise since 1st of April is 739%, which Mr. Sardesai rightly pointed out is 8 times. Now, under the circumstances, where exactly, Mr. Acharya, you think the current ruling party of Goa has failed the people of Goa?
On two fronts. First is not preparing for the second wave. And remember one thing, what did the experience of first wave teach us? It taught us that whatever happens in Mumbai and Delhi happens inevitably 2 weeks later in Goa. So if the cases start going exponentially high in Mumbai and Delhi, the cases start going up in Goa also 2 weeks later exponentially higher. So when the Mumbai cases started going up, when the Gujarat cases started going up, when the Delhi cases started going up, this administration, because of the previous experience of the first wave, should have taken measures and put restrictions on movement and restrictions on entry. And what this administration did in turn is it said that Goa was the only state which said that your even negative RT-PCR certificate is not required to enter the state. And when Mumbai cases were peaking and Delhi cases were peaking, when people started demanding that please impose a lockdown, the state refused to do that. Now when the cases started increasing also, people said now the cases in Goa are also increasing. Please enforce movement restriction on movement. The state still refused to do it. Then the cases started going exponentially higher the way it did in the metros. So at that point of time, local self-governing bodies like panchayats and municipalities started enforcing their own localized lockdown, and people started following those lockdowns. That compared this state government go for a curfew. And today we are completing 8 days of the curfew. So imagine we started peaking probably in the second week of April. and we decided to go for restriction on movement practically 3 weeks later. And when as you know, the nature of this
Yes,
second
9th
wave,
of May, I
if you-
think,
if you-
yes.
if-
Yes, when the
if you are
lockdown was
going
announced.
to-
So you're saying
yes.
that the announcement of lockdown
if
has
you are
come
going to-
way
if
too
you are-
late.
if you are going-
And you're also
if you are
saying that there
going
was
to
full-fledged tourism going on. And I'm going to vouchsafe for that and say that I have friends from Maharashtra who were going to Goa in droves. There were no restrictions. And Maharashtra at that time was in a peak of the COVID situation. Anybody from Maharashtra, however, could enter Goa. There was no RT-PCR negative certificate required, and the casinos were operating in full throttle. Even the beaches, everything was fully functional, no restrictions on tourists. So that was the situation the whole of April in Goa. Early May is when the authorities woke up. 9th of May is when the lockdown was imposed. So in many ways, it was as if Goa was operating in some alternate universe. You know, there were absolutely no sense of what is going on in neighboring Maharashtra. So, Mr. Pathak, I want to ask you that whether it is Goa or whether it is any other state, what we see even here, I believe there were panchayat and municipal level elections going on. The government was busy focusing on that. Same thing with Bengal also, we kept asking this question, that somewhere you lost sight of the ground realities of what people on ground are going through because you are too consumed with the electoral politics. Is the same thing that has happened in Goa as well, Mr. Pathak?
See, Parinda, you cannot generalize like this. See, every state has got their own problems, and dynamics of this COVID-2 is altogether different. In some states there was election, in some states there was no election. Now you are talking about RT-PCR test was not imposed in Goa. Maharashtra has been consistently maintaining this RT-PCR test.
Yes.
Then why still 70,000 cases per day has gone up? Therefore, you cannot generalize and blame BJP government or central government alone. There could be various issues. As far as the deaths are concerned, I am there. There are some manual lapses. 80 plus lives have gone. I sympathize for that. However, this government has now tightened all the situation. Private hospitals are already taken control of by this government, and patients are going to be shifted. Situation will improve. There is no question of blaming that because of the election it has happened, because of the cricket it has happened. There are some lapses. And in every state, whether it is Maharashtra, whether it is Punjab, whether it is Madhya Pradesh, there was a sudden spurt. And because of that, situation overwhelmed and all the authorities all across India failed. Let us accept that position and then blame.
Right. Okay, let me take closing comments. Yes, Mr. Sardesai. So it seems that the center cannot be blamed for this. And we hear this constantly. Health is a state subject. The government of the state, of course, must take responsibility, which Mr. Pathak says there may have been some lapses. But then again, what is your contention going forward now? What can be done? The court intervention, nothing has worked. There have been more deaths after that as well, despite the court saying that this is not how lives should be snuffed out of people because you couldn't arrange a tractor or a transfer of oxygen to a cylinder for that matter.
First thing is the people who have died, the 83 people whom we are talking of, have to be compensated by the government in the same way as the Chamarajnagar incident, in which the Karnataka High Court has also invoked Article 21, right to life. And I think this monumental COVID mismanagement or failure cannot go unpunished. Somebody has to be held accountable to it. And we have the highest positivity rate in India. The last 1,000 deaths have occurred in 19 days. We have always faltered on planning and preparation for COVID. So it is high time that the High Court has a High Court monitored task force of experts and Goan officials to take care of this, because this chief minister, who calls himself a doctor, could not think like a doctor nor like a chief minister. His deputy chief minister kept on telling people that the show must go on. He facilitated raves everywhere. These people got 300 crores from the central government, which was announced by the Union Finance Minister in the budget, for celebrating 60 years of liberation, but could not get funds to ramp up the medical infrastructure in India's most important tourist state. So it is a shame that we have got a government like this. This government has to go, the chief minister has to resign, and there are several facilities, more facilities available. We have 2 floors of the South District Hospital in Margao, which could be opened up for COVID, which is not being opened up because the government has eyes to privatize this. There is a hospital in Mandur which was inaugurated a few months before, which also could be made into a COVID center, which has not been done. In Kerala, we see a Coca-Cola factory being converted into COVID. Here we have a...
All right, so you are saying the current ruling party in Goa must take responsibility for the unfortunate deaths. Well, we cannot absolve, of course, the party, the ruling government from that. But I want to just conclude by what the Goa bench of Bombay High Court has said, that there exists a corresponding duty cast on the state to ensure that life is not extinguished on account of inability on the part of the state to supply oxygen to the unfortunate victims of the pandemic. The duty can neither be avoided by pleading helplessness nor by putting forth logistical difficulties in supplying and sourcing oxygen. Remember, Goa was the first state to boast that it had brought cases down to zero. Today, the daily cases have gone above 2,600. That's the current situation, even as a cyclone right now is now mounting the challenges for the administration. Thanks for joining us, Pramod Acharya, Mr. Sardesai, and Mr. Vishwas Pathak, for giving us your time on Urban Debate today.